Welcome to the WTL What the Law podcast. I'm your host Callum Stacey, and you're listening to the latest episode in our series inspired by a conversation with a group of law students involved in pro bono law clinics. These students were incredibly proactive, but from our conversation it became apparent that they perhaps didn't have the opportunity to be exposed to the wide variety of careers that law graduates can have the benefit of. As a result, we wanted to create a series that was accessible to all, that shines a light on some of the fantastic lawyers that we happen to have either worked with or call friends and family. And we want to shine a light on the diversity of their career journeys to date, to hopefully inform and inspire. Today, I have the privilege of being joined by Audrey Ametis. Audrey is the founder of her eponymous wedding and events planning company and an ambassador lawyer with Elevate, the expert-led software-powered law company. Prior to this, Audrey's career has included completing law degrees in both France and England, working in Dubai with GE and Exterin, and 8 years with the supermajor Total Energies in both their London and Paris offices. So Audrey, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
No, really, I truly mean that for us it is an absolute privilege having somebody like yourself come on. So what we've typically done in these types of conversations is we give that brief intro so that people can get a snapshot of Audrey to date. But what we really like to do is go back to the start. Where did it start for Audrey? Was it back in Paris? Was it in somewhere else? Was it London? And how did you get to the point of deciding that you wanted to study law at university?
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Again, a huge privilege. Thank you very much indeed for having me on the platform. Such a great initiative. Beautiful summary. You are absolutely right. So I'm a French legal counsel, but I'm also a UK qualified solicitor. PQE 8 now. However, I've got over 17 years of international experience in telecom, in oil and gas, data privacy, cybersecurity, mining. But it all started when I studied law in Lyon. So actually, I'm from Lyon, not from Paris. Lyon is. Have you ever been to Lyon? It's a beautiful city.
No, I'm terrible. I've basically been to the south of France and Paris, and a little bit. My aunt used to live in the northwest, but it was in the middle of absolutely nowhere.
Brilliant. Well, it's good enough. And please, if you have the opportunity, objectively, not because I am from Lyon, please do visit this city. It's beautiful. It's located in east center France. It sits in the junction of the Rhône and the Saône River. It's a beautiful, beautiful city, but also it's well known for its renowned university. Now then, I'm going here to disclose a bit of my age, but when I studied law in 1998, at the time, Université Jean Moulin Lyon 3 was number 6 in the top 10 of the best universities in Europe. So you had Oxford, Cambridge, La Sorbonne in Paris, Panthéon-Assas in Paris, Strasbourg University was really good in EC law, and then Lyon was number 6. So yes, that's the background. Studied law in Lyon and also in the UK.
And was it something that when you were going through kind of the equivalent of high school, was it something that you're like, yeah, legal, that's where it's at? Or was it somebody was perhaps pushing you, saying, I think that could be a good career choice for you? Or
it's such a good question. Thank you. I knew that I wanted to study law, not become a lawyer. So I'll go back to it, study law, thanks to my sister. I have an older sister. She's 5 years older than me. And we were sharing a room so I could listen to, what she was studying. And I thought how powerful it is to study law, to know your rights. She actually ended up doing something completely different. She went into a business school after 1 year. She didn't like it, but I did. I really enjoyed it. And yes, it's thanks to my sister that I studied law. I think it's I'm very, very grateful, because without her, I would not have had that particular access to what does it mean to study law. But in Lyon, yes, we had some of the best universities, and so it was such a pleasure to study law. But interestingly enough, I actually in high school wanted to become an English teacher.
Okay.
But again, thanks to my sister, because the 5-year-old gap, right? So when I was 10, she was 15. I was listening to her. I learned the whole program in English in advance. That means I had very good grades. And you know how it is when you're really good into something, and then the teacher says, "Oh, look at Audrey, she's doing very well in English." So you embrace the whole thing. You want to know about the language, but you also want to know about the culture, about the country. So I wanted to be an English teacher. And then listening to my sister again, wanted to study. Initially, however, I wanted to be a judge, criminal law, minor, working with minors. I realized when I was 20 years old that I think I wanted to learn a bit more about life as opposed to just doing law. I think it's such a difficult role. I don't think you can kind of switch off. You work on some cases and then you can go back home, and at least in my opinion, I think struggle to switch off and to say, oh yes, I worked on this terrible matter, but now, yes, it's the weekend. So I decided, okay, maybe you learn about yourself. I studied public law, really enjoyed it, and I was thinking, okay, why don't I combine this love for the languages and the love for law, and be a UK solicitor, be an international lawyer in public law. That was the plan.
And is that when you took the move to go from France over to Leicester and do, was it a master's or? Yes.
It was a master's degree. That's right. So I studied law for 4 years in France, and I obtained a master's degree in public law. But then there was an opportunity to do, at the time it was called an Erasmus year. So English students would move to France and the French students would go to the UK. That was pre-Brexit. I think sadly it stopped, but I hope, fingers crossed, that there's like equivalent of such international, exchange of students program, because it was such a good experience. I studied, so I obtained the master's degree in private law. I studied in Leicester. I studied tort law, criminal law, administrative law, and another one I forgot now. Maybe a bit too much partying as well, but it was fantastic because I was living in this huge house with students coming from Italy, from Spain, from Japan, and it was a relaxing year because there was no pressure. I had already obtained my master's degree in France, so I was studying another master's degree, but there was no pressure. Thing is, I liked it so much that I decided then to stay in the UK. And after Leicester, I moved to London.
And just out of interest, was studying in the UK versus studying law in France, was there much of a difference? Was there how they taught different, or because obviously the legal systems would be different, but in terms of the general approach to education, was it similar, or did you come to the UK and think, I can put my feet up now?
I thought it was night and day. And I have to share, I remember my first, lecture theatre, going to my first lecture in England. There was a chap drinking a Red Bull, which at the time was illegal in France. And I was like, what is going on? But all jokes aside, in France, I found, the first year of law school was extremely daunting. I was working at 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. It requires a lot of stamina. It's not as bad as studying medicine when you want to, when you want to go to medical uni, because in France, I remember it was very competitive. If you wanted to become a doctor, as in, if you miss a lecture, no one is going to give you the paperwork. You miss it, that's it. I've even heard horror stories where students would go into the library, shred some, like, if the teacher is asking to complete or conduct some studying on a particular and referring to a particular book, shred like the pages of the book. I mean, nightmare to study, to become a doctor in France. Really, really competitive. So in comparison, studying law was okay. But in France, I found, yes, really long hours in the lecture theatre. When I moved to the UK, I thought it was very practical, very pragmatic, very autonomous. So you would study perhaps from, in the morning until the afternoon, and then you would have study group. And I personally thought the UK system was a better way to get ready for the work life, because it's liaising, working a group as opposed to just being by yourself and writing notes for hours and hours. So my preference, and I think it's one of the reasons why I qualified as UK solicitor, was the UK system. However, I have to say one of the big differences at the time, the fees for the university in France was 2,000 francs, which is about 200, 300 quid, which is not the case in the UK. So very, very grateful for France, because I don't think I would have been able to qualify here.
This is where I'm going to play my Scottish card. So in Scotland, it's if you're a Scottish resident, I think it's still the case, but it certainly was when I was there. It was free, and it I think made such a huge difference, because from just speaking to the people that I was there with to speaking to people whilst doing this podcast, it just removes a barrier. And the caps may have changed slightly, but last time I looked at this, it was about around £9,000 per year in England. I think it's even worse if you're coming from outside of England and for something that is hopefully a vocational degree, it's an incredible burden and barrier. That by the sounds of it, France have taken a different approach to Scotland, certainly tried to maintain its difference of approach, which hopefully is only a good thing. But it's crazy.
It is crazy, and it's such a good point you're raising. Now, then, I don't know how it is today, but I know in general having like a very good healthcare system for free or a very small portion of the amount of money. I know to me that was priceless to be able to go to not only university, one of the best in Europe. So, you have like a very, very good degree for almost nothing. And I think what Scotland did at your time, and it's incredible to be able to go for free. An interesting story. I had 0.8% of chances of becoming a lawyer. And why do I do that?
How have you come up with that stat?
Exactly. It's quite incredible. When I was studying, when I was 18 years old in France, we were studying, there was this philosopher, Pierre Bourdieu. He created a table of statistics. Now then, only statistics, right? So sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's not. But if your mom is a lawyer, your dad is a lawyer, you had 75% of chances of being a lawyer, because you can chat with them. They can tell you, for instance, go to that university, it's better than that one in Lyon. For instance, Université Jean Moulin Lyon 3 is better in law than Lyon 2. But if you want to study literature, don't go to 3, go to Jean Moulin Lyon 2, because it's a better one. So this kind of advice, or you can recommend books, etc. My mom was working at the time as a nanny, and my dad was blue collar, working at night in a warehouse. So when I looked at, okay, mom, dad, I had 0.8%. And I was like, it's going to be tough. And I'm not even talking about international UK solicitor, oil and gas lawyer. I'm talking just a lawyer in France, in Lyon, 0.8%. But it's still possible. And I think it's one of the reasons why I'm so happy to be here with you today, because it's to show that you can take different career paths. It's not exactly the traditional one, but it's possible to do it. It's possible to qualify.
Absolutely. And for the rest of us, thank goodness there is always a 0.8% chance, I would say. because I have to admit, from my perspective, I've always been very lucky. Before we hit record, I was saying to Audrey that in my family, my mum's a lawyer, although she just recently retired. And even though she did a type of law that I do not understand, it's criminal law, it's stuff that I would be utterly useless at. And thankfully, I've never had the need to actually know how it works. But just having that normalization almost of, okay, lawyers, right? That's not necessarily some mythical thing that you can build up in your head and stuff like this, I think made a huge difference. And as it turns out, frankly, I fell into law. I knew I wanted to go to Aberdeen at the time, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I put that down and they let me in. And, super fortunate, but absolutely not by design whatsoever. But yeah, and I think it is just such a key point that really, for the health of the profession, the need to have people coming through from different perspectives, the need to have people coming through that have the ambition to become a lawyer is hugely important. I mean, as a perhaps daft example, growing up in Glasgow, I played football. And Audrey, I don't know if you know this, but traditionally, football in Glasgow, you play in some pretty horrible parts of town. If you want to play sort of in more privileged parts, you play rugby and things like this. But there was a couple of kids on the team who were really, really, really good, like going off and having professional trials and things like this. But two of them were in playing with us and then did a year in Kilmarnock. Now, Kilmarnock to Glasgow is about 40-minute drive, and Kilmarnock are a professional team. They were absolutely brilliant. Got to about 16, and the situation and atmosphere that they were in meant that they just completely closed. Kilmarnock was too far. The people that were around them at the time roped them in. One of the guys apparently ended up, because he was not necessarily academically smart, but really, really on the ball. Really clever kid. Apparently by the time he was 21, he was in jail because he'd become a very effective car thief. Because he was using the smarts, unfortunately, but being in that kind of atmosphere and culture, he went down a path where, if you looked at his talent and ability at playing football, he could have been, absolutely fantastic. And this is one of the reasons that maybe something like this, even if it just reaches one person, to say, you know what, doesn't matter where you're from. Here's a bunch of people that A, can show you that it's within your control, B, that there's not a blocker. It can be tough, which I'm sure absolutely has been at points, but it's possible. And with all of these podcasts, what we're doing is trying to shine a light on people that, for want of a better word, care. And if people want to reach out, obviously more than happy, with everybody's permission, to pass on details and things like this. But yeah, sorry, I will get off my soapbox.
That's because it's so important, the example that you share, and sometimes being in a situation, an environment that you don't know can be quite, how can I put it? Yes, it generates lots of fear. You're not used to it. You're not used to be surrounded by people studying law or by lawyers, and then you go back into your your own world, and then it doesn't work. It shouldn't be that way. In fact, you're bringing something incredible by being yourself. It's also the companies, they love it. They love diversity, not because they have to do it for some sort of quota or from like human resources perspective. It's because if you have a team with different members, they're going to think differently. They're going to think from a different angle. And in fact, there's a report from EY. Diversity brings money. You don't do it, just for the sake of it,
Yeah.
because you're thinking it's going to be best for a better world. It's actually having a diverse team from different background makes it more successful for the company, brings more income. So that's brilliant. But I completely get it, like the example that you gave. I remember when I studied law in France the first year, when I was studying from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's because not only I was studying in Lyon, but I was studying I was doing in classe préparatoire, École Normale Sup. Now then it's like an elite higher institution in France. I stayed only 1 year because it was so, let's say if you had a grade like 10 out of 20, oh, it's mediocre. It's like, so, and I'm like, okay, I don't have time for that. Initially, I was wondering whether I'd be a teacher in law. So I had to take this particular path. But then I realized, no, I want to study law. So I just carried on just the law school. But yeah, it can be daunting. It can be daunting sometimes.
And I guess just looping this back to where we got to in your career story. So you've done a year in Leicester. You've got your master's.
Right.
You've now double master's, master squared in legal education. And what's the next step? Is that when you go to Dubai, or did you start doing a traineeship, or how did that work? And what were you looking for at that point?
It goes back a few years now, decades even. But what I decided to do after leaving Leicester was like, okay, I'm going to stay in London. But strangely enough, well, actually, it does make sense. Studying law after, in maîtrise, after a master's degree, you're quite senior into the level of being a student, and you're quite at the high level of your legal education. But going back to the UK, you're back at the bottom of the ladder. So I was thinking, I need to. In France, I had already organized some, attended some traineeships in law firms. But in the UK, I had no experience. So I was like, okay, first I need to gain some experience. So and it's an interesting story that I'll tell you in a second, but I managed to find a job in London, part-time. Then I moved to another law firm full-time. At the time, I was an administrative assistant. Mm-hmm. But what I was doing all my admin tasks in the morning so I can work on some legal matters in the afternoon. So again, don't be scared of a job title. You make it what you want. I was hired to make tea, coffee, some copies, but you make it what you want. But you also have to be surrounded by people who give you opportunities. So the partners in the law firm, they could see that I was hungry. I wanted to learn. I wanted to participate to some matters, and I was more acting like a trainee solicitor than anything else in this firm. But at some point, after a couple of years, I was like, on my CV, okay, France, England, fair enough, it's not good enough. I had started studying the PGDL, part-time evening, Monday and Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m., I think, or 6 to 9. That wasn't pretty, all your friends are going out, but then you're at home, you're studying, but this is what it is, not the traditional path of, LLB 3 years, then traineeship, you have to create your own path. But then it's okay. France, England, that was good. But I thought it's not international enough. So I applied to a job in Hong Kong, actually, because I realized, okay, I want to be specialized in energy-related contracts, construction, arbitration. And I thought, there's ICC in Hong Kong. I can learn more about construction contract, etc., arbitration. So I applied for a job in Hong Kong. I don't have any news. And then I get a phone call for a job in Dubai with General Electric. And the partner at the time of the law firm I was working on was like, Audrey, there's God and there's GE. You have to go. At the time, GE was doing fantastically financially. Yep. And so I decided, okay, off I go. Off I went with my 2 pieces of luggage. I didn't know anything about Dubai. I had purchased 150 quid of guides because I wanted to know more about living in Dubai, but I didn't know anyone there. And I just decided, okay, I had never been there before, but I was thinking, what can go wrong, right? Now then, I do appear as being kind of fearless, but there's always a plan. just before going to Dubai, I had done a traineeship in a UK underwriting company, so insurance, reinsurance. It went very well. So I was thinking, okay, worst case scenario, I go to Dubai, it doesn't work, I just come back to London. But I had kind of already lined up a potential role, right? So it's taking risks, but planned risks when you know, okay, if it goes wrong, it's not the end of the world. But I decided to take the leap of faith. Off I went to Dubai, fantastic experience. Also, the lifestyle is superb. You just go to the swimming pool during your lunchtime, and it's, in October, it was 28 degrees. Summer is hot. You're talking about, I remember once in June, 52 degrees. So
that's just not conducive to human life.
Exactly, but then you've got AC everywhere. You've got AC in the taxi, ACs, in the malls, AC everywhere. Excellent, experience in terms of. I think if you want to be an energy-related contract lawyer or in construction, going to the Middle East is a key step in your career path. I've worked with different culture. Middle East, but also like Russian. I had lots of Russian colleagues, and this is where I decided to go in oil and gas. But at the time, I was a bit of a spoiled brat. I think I wanted to just come back to Europe, and I'll tell you why for the reasons why in a second. But beautiful lifestyle. There was no tax at all. I think now they've got some sort of a VAT, but there was no income tax. Beautiful weather all year long. It's just a different life. I remember one day I woke up, I really wanted to eat a lahmacun. It's like this Turkish pizza. Mm-hmm. I just pick up my phone and call Emirates and book a flight to Istanbul, because why not? It's like 2 to 3 hours flight. I was looking at a brochure. There was like a very good yoga lesson. It was in Bangkok. Off I went. I went to Bangkok for the weekend. I would go to Singapore for the weekend. So it's like my friends, I live in North London, and we have had so far horrible weather for the summer. But then if you want to go away, it's usually in the English countryside for a nice weekend. My friends in Dubai, they go to Maldives or Seychelles for the weekend because it's a short flight. So amazing lifestyle, amazing from a work experience standpoint. However, at the time, I just wanted to leave the place because I wanted to come back and qualify as a UK solicitor. At the time, I had already a good CV. People were saying, you have a very good CV, but you're not a qualified lawyer. So I wanted I left Dubai and I came back to study the LPC in England. At the time, I didn't have a training contract lined up, but I had saved a huge amount of money within 3 months. I think I stayed. I was in Dubai 2007 to 2010. Lots of partying as well. You earn a lot, but you spend a lot, so you have to be a bit careful. But the last 3 months, when I was dedicated, I saved a lot, and I was able to pay for my own law school. And it's taking a gamble, because I didn't know at the time that I would find a traineeship in-house.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess we'll come into this a bit more detail, but when you presumably get back into the LPC and then start trying to find the training contract, was the first port of call to look at law firms and things like this, or had you, given the GE experience, thought, you know what, actually in-house, much more for me, I'll see if there's some opportunity there?
Absolutely. I think it's because I worked in-house that I decided that it was the best system for me. Initially, it wasn't. It was by force that I couldn't go to law firms. My CV wasn't looking like an English law student CV, so it was a bit difficult for HR to know. Okay, she hasn't got like an LLB. You haven't got those pointers where you're thinking, okay, like where. They couldn't match what I had studied with a typical system in the UK. So initially it was by force. It's applying, sending, I think 100 letters to law firms, being rejected. I did have the opportunity to do a vacation placement at Hogan Lovells at the time. Really enjoyed it. Incredible experience. But then the more I worked in law firms as a paralegal, but the older I would get, the older I realized I think in-house is better for me. The working hours, number one, you have more consistency into your working hours. And depending on the area, you can still make, a lot of money if you're in-house in oil and gas or in energy in some areas. In today's world, I would say AI, cybersecurity, corporate. So the money was there with a better lifestyle. And it was just, the way I work, in the sense that in-house, you really step into the shoes of the client. So in today's world, I work with external legal counsel. They are extremely useful. But don't send me a 20-page memo about, some binding precedents from the 18th century. Yeah. I have a meeting with the top management in half an hour, who then are going to report to the CEO, or I've got a meeting with the chief legal counsel and the CEO. I need an executive summary, bullet point, like quick dot point summary. And then, of course, you have to explain your legal rationale. I completely get that. But it's really, I think you work more with business acumen when you work in-house, and it's a different way of working. And it was my preferred choice. However, perhaps a practical tip I would give to someone is that even if you already know somehow that you want to work in-house, still you have to, either as a paralegal, but work in a law firm, because you will improve your drafting skills dramatically. You do need to go at some point to work in a law firm, I think. Even if your long plan goal is to work in-house, I would strongly recommend that. I was lucky enough so after Dubai, I came back to the UK briefly. I found a role with Total Energies now. And when I worked initially, it was in France. And I told them after a year, okay, I need to go back to the UK. I want to qualify as a solicitor. That's what I'm studying. I need my hierarchy to be a UK qualified solicitor. And very grateful, they sent me as an expat. So even better than I dreamt of in London, in Canary Wharf, which is the financial London hub and legal world. This is how we met, actually, you and I. So very, very grateful, and I had the opportunity to train as a commercial solicitor, to train in-house, and to do my arbitration seat in an international law firm. It was Denton's at the time. So yes, I think in-house is, it might not be for everyone, but for me it was brilliant.
And was it, so my understanding of Total's legal team in England at the time, or in the UK at the time, was typically they didn't take on trainees as employees. You might get a trainee as a secondee from a law firm or things like this. So was that something that you basically lobbied for or convinced, or how did that come about that they went, okay, you know what, we can get you in and we can get you that training to get you qualified?
Thank you. It's such a good question. I definitely lobbied for, but again, I think you can raise your voice, you can explain your project, but you need to have people who are willing to listen. So again, after a year, at being at Total in France, I said, I do need to, go to the UK and qualify. And there wasn't a system in place. But then I spoke to my boss and the boss of my boss, and they were thinking, we can't send you 2 years in a law firm. You still have to be an employee of Total. What we can do, because there's a UK solicitor, is there are some forms with the SRA, the Solicitors Regulation Authority. You can shadow a solicitor, you can become a trainee. And there was another woman at the time also doing that. I think we kind of created the system. The system wasn't there, we created it for us. And then there was an opportunity because you do have to have an arbitration seat or a dispute resolution. So then there was an opportunity, to do a secondment, either 3 months or 6 months. But it was some lobbying and explaining there's no other choice. I need to do that. I've worked very hard. I paid a huge amount of money for the LPC that I was doing part-time Yes, part-time, because I remember I was working in France the first year, and then I would go to London once a month, exactly, back and forth. There was lots of virtual lessons, but then going to France once a month, and then there was no choice. It had to be done. Very grateful that I had this opportunity with Total. That was incredible.
But I do think it loops back to something you said earlier, actually, about not necessarily ignoring the title of a job, but you make the job. You know, if you can get your foot in the door, then it gives opportunities. Like Total doing in the UK a traineeship will not be on any career website or advertising or anything like this. But ultimately, by having taken the leap and by doing the part-time stuff and everything else in the background, you're then able to create that opportunity, which is fantastic.
Absolutely,
Okay,
and I'm so very grateful to Total. Sorry, please go on.
No, I was going to say, so we get to the point where you're qualified. I know because I think this was I got to meet you for the first time relatively soon thereafter, and you're part of the gas and power team, as you say, in Canary Wharf. When you're at that point, do you feel like you've made it, or is that just the latest tick in the box, and actually Audrey's got this whole other next step plan, etc., in your head?
In my mind, I was, yes, I made it. I did it. I'm a UK qualified solicitor. I'm working for an incredible international company. From the outside, then I'm extremely successful, but there are some days when I'm deeply, deeply unhappy. I'm happy at work. I like my work, but I've got this feeling where I should be doing something else. And it's thanks to Total. I'm extremely grateful. I'm still in touch with a lot of people at this company, Total Energies. They sent me to California to do a leadership business skills seminar. And during these, very, very grateful, because it's only, I think, like maybe 2% of employees who've got the opportunities to go to this type of trainings. But going there, we met up with some really large corporations, but also some startups. And I realized how amazing it is to own your own company, how amazing it is to have your own vision. And it was just in the back of my mind. But I was working as a lawyer, but I have to explain that I was sometimes helping friends, helping colleagues organize weddings. I was doing maybe one every year, every 2 years. To me, it was pure pleasure. It all started by chance, actually. I was attending an engagement party in the suburb of Paris, and I was a guest. I was just invited to attend the engagement party. The couple had organized like beverages and catering company, but that's it. And I told them, guys, I mean, you're getting engaged. It's a big thing. So I've organized the table linen and the china, and it was beautiful. Naturally, I wanted to be very well organized. A friend who saw that was like, well, why don't you organize my wedding if you like it so much in south of France? That was the year after. But that was just for pleasure. I never thought of creating it as a business. And thanks to Total, I had this aha moment when I thought, I really actually enjoy it. I still want to be a lawyer, but being like in a corporation where it's like a permanent role doesn't work for me. I need more freedom. I need more flexibility. And that's how I became a flexi solicitor in 2019 with Elevate.
So that was in 2019. From a bit of LinkedIn stalking, did the events business, was that formulated and running so you're not just doing it for friends and whatnot before you took the jump to Elevate? Or was it a sort of concurrent, right, we're having this big bang moment and we're going to change everything?
It was concurrent. We're having this big bang, we're going to change everything. However, it was planned and it was gradual, because otherwise it can be quite frightening to live. I had a very good job in one of the best companies in the world. So you don't just leave a job like this to start, your own company without doing a lot of planning. I had joined like an alliance of wedding planners. We had a code of conduct. I love that part. I had met with a wedding planner. I had prepared a business plan. But I also still wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't want to. I know some planners who were lawyers. They didn't like it at all. They stopped being a lawyer and they became a wedding planner. That wasn't the case for me. I still wanted to be a lawyer, and that's how I needed this flexi system whereby sometimes I work on a part-time basis, sometimes I work on a full-time basis, sometimes I just work a few hours ad hoc, for law firms, providing some advice to give me time for my company. And also, I have to say, another reason why I wanted to leave my work as a legal counsel in-house was because I wanted to get more expertise. I feel in-house, sometimes you do a bit of everything. At the time, I was doing, I was giving advice on the French law, on the English law. I was reviewing gas and power agreements, but sometimes you can have a question from HR. Sometimes you can have, it's the beauty of it on one hand, because you work in the business, you're the lawyer for the business. But I felt I want to really get an expertise. And at the time, the hot topic was the GDPR. You might recall how enthusiastic I was about it.
Yes.
Conducting trainings.
I think it was Stephen at the time was thanking his lucky stars, because I think if you went to any other in-house legal team, people would just sort of shrink away as soon as somebody said data protection. And then at the time, Audrey was like, "This is great. I love it."
I loved it. I loved it so much. For me, it was part of like a continuity of human rights, of knowing your rights, your personal data. So I really embrace the whole topic. And it was brilliant because I was passionate about it, but it was really the hot topic. And there were lots of jobs in the market, very well paid job in data privacy, data protection. And I was thinking, okay, now it's the time to take the leap of faith and create the company and leave Total. It wasn't an easy decision, but I'm very happy I did it, simply because there was no other choice. Every day you're living and breathing and thinking about the company. And there's no other choice. You have to take the leap of faith, but it's gradually and planned.
Yeah, it's not the sort of full blind just jumping. It's a kind of risk assessed leap of faith, if I can put it that way.
100%. It's the perfect term. I tell you what, I attended a networking event before leaving Total, not linked to Total at all. And I was discussing with a woman, and I was saying, okay, I'm a lawyer, but I'm thinking of becoming a wedding planner. And she burst into laughing. And I didn't say anything, because to me, people think wedding planners is like flowers and cake and balloons. Yeah. It's a $400 billion industry in the US. It's at least prior to the pandemic, a $10 billion industry in the UK. It's huge. Some of my competitors, they work on weddings, like the couple who spend 50 grand on a cake. We are not there yet with the company Audrey Ametis Weddings, but we're growing, we're getting there, yeah. We're working on incredible projects. And at that level, when you work on a wedding and it's with a budget of 250K, $500,000, even more, it's not balloons and flowers and love. It's like project management. It's military style organization. And as a lawyer, it helps me so much in my work as a planner, because you're talking about having a business. So implementing contracts, having insurance, liaising with other suppliers. You're talking health and safety. When after 8 years in oil and gas, you're always thinking of safety first, and thanks to Total. So it's liaising with the florist and saying, okay, your beautiful flower wall, can you give me the weight and the dimensions? Why? Because you're thinking it can fall on some kids. You're always thinking health and safety. You're always thinking logistics. It helped a lot being a lawyer during the pandemic. I gave some advice to couples. Why?
Force majeure
because
and
in the
all
contract,
sorts of stuff.
Force majeure, exactly. Termination of contract, insurance. It helps me still being a lawyer as a planner, because it makes me more creative, more innovative, and it keeps me grounded. because yes, when you speak to couples and they're thinking of spending 50K on a cake, you need to take a step back and thinking that's not the real life. So I like being a lawyer still today, because we need to take a step back. It makes you more humble, because again, it's a difficult job. There's a lot of planning, but ultimately we are organizing parties. We are not, finding a cure to cancer. So it's important to stay humble and to stay calm, because at Total I was working on $500 million, project in oil and gas. When things go wrong, touch wood. We haven't had any issues. So we had issues in the past. It's oil and gas, but everybody recalls the BP Macondo incident back in April 2010, when there was an explosion in the Gulf of Mexico. That's what happens when things go wrong in oil and gas.
Yeah.
When things go wrong, sometimes I was speaking to clients, they're like, "Oh my God, you don't know what happened. I forgot. I had the wrong linen." I want to say, it's okay. We're going to find a solution.
We can deal with this.
We can deal with it. It's not an explosion on a platform. So yes, that's immensely helpful to wear those two hats, really.
And just out of interest, as a business owner now, when you put your lawyer hat back on and you've got that lawyer-client relationship, have you found that you approach that differently now that when you take that hat off, you put the client hat back on, and you could be dealing with similar things? Or is it something that you manage to kind of segregate quite well, sort of Audrey wedding versus Audrey lawyer?
I like having two separate worlds, that's for sure. But it's such a good question you're raising, because initially when I started, I was very corporate. My website was corporate. Liaising, trying to attract clients was very corporate, in a corporate manner. My contract, blimey, was maybe a 10-page contract. They are not, purchasing oil and gas services. It needs to be simple, to the point, with everything that is needed for a contract. But it forces you to simplify things. But it took me years. I've had the business for over 7 years now. Yes, it does take some time, but it's also so helpful. Like our last two weddings were featured in Hello Magazine.
Congratulations!
That means a lot.
That's fantastic.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, that's a big achievement. With the team, we've done a fantastic work. But what does it mean in the background? A lot of confidentiality, potential issues. Sometimes you need to sign NDAs. So there's always, I will always be a lawyer. I always think as a lawyer, but the way I approach things is different. So it's approaching things like a 5-star hotel with the oil and gas brain in the background always.
That's fantastic. Listen, I'm conscious that I've taken up lots and lots of your time. So I'd like to just bring things to a bit of a conclusion on.
Sure.
It sounds like you're in a good place right now, which is fantastic. But is there anything that's on your sort of goals list or hit list that you want to get as the next main objective? I mean, you've already got Hello Magazine, so you've ticked that off. You've done the corporate world in legal terms, but is there anything that you're like, actually, this is where I want to be in 2025 or later?
True. Well, I think in the legal world, there's no hit list as such. I just want things to carry on the way they are. I'm very happy with my working as a flexi lawyer. I would not want things to change for the next year or two. In the event world, it's quite interesting. So you're kind of having the news prior, like VIP style, hot off the press. We are moving from being Audrey Ametis weddings to Ametis events. So we are diversifying our portfolio to not only weddings and engagement parties, but to Christmas parties, to corporate events, to birthday parties. So we want to grow and elevate the business. But interestingly, after all those years being successful, and maybe it's because, yes, I qualified as a solicitor. I didn't, stay as a paralegal. Nothing wrong being a paralegal, but that was my goal. So I've achieved my goal. So yes, maybe today I can say that because yes, I'm a UK qualified solicitor. Yes, I'm doing beautiful events, but ultimately today being successful is sleeping 8 hours. When I sleep 8 hours a night, I'm happy. That's happiness. And it's interesting. It's sleep like food is by far, I think, the best medicine. And yes, that's what makes me happy. I want more serenity. I want more calm. I would say, because we're wrapping up, to share some tips with aspiring lawyer. Keep an open mind. You never know. Like the example of applying for Hong Kong. I ended up in Dubai. When I landed in Dubai, actually, I got a phone call for the interview in Hong Kong. But keep an open mind. Do your research. Like even if you just want to be a UK solicitor, see maybe other countries do have some initiatives that will help you speed the process. Develop your network. So important, because I think we are all more or less having like a good grade, maybe a 2-1 or a first if you're gifted, from a more or less good university. How you're going to differentiate yourself, in fact, with your hobbies, what you like outside work and network. So yes, carrying on a bit of calm. That's what we want for the next 3 years.
That sounds absolutely perfect. It really does. So listen, Audrey, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us all today. As I mentioned, we'll put this out on the usual sort of podcast channels and whatnot. If anybody is listening to this and wants to get in touch, please do. And just once again, thank you so much.
Thank you ever so much for having me. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.